All right, welcome everyone to another Lego Masters live show recap of season 2. Today we're going to be talking about episode 7. This was the win challenge. Now, again, thanks to you guys for tuning in. As you know, we haven't had an episode for a couple weeks now. I think there was a 3-week break, and I mean, Christian from All Out Brick is with me. We can only assume that it's probably just because of the Olympics and maybe some post-production reasons as well. But it's glad to be back, and we're back with a bang because, you know, with season 1, we had the weight challenge. That was kind of the really big physical, challenge that they had. But other than that, nothing crazy. Whereas this season, we've seen earthquakes, we've seen demolition derbies, and now we have a wind challenge that goes up to potentially 60 miles an hour, as we see. So, excited to talk about this one, definitely. How about you, Christian?
Yeah, I'm excited too. This was a fun challenge. As a structural engineer, this was a lot of fun, and just brainstorming, sitting on the couch, yelling at my TV about different ideas. I'm excited to talk about it too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there were some moments, especially with the team that I was unfortunately had to go, where I was just like, "Oh no, come on!" But yeah, just excited to see that they're embracing challenges like this. I think this one was a very smart one to do. I don't know, between this and the earthquake one, I think I like this one just a little more. Just because of the fact that not only was there engineering involved,
audio
but
capture,
every
not
team's
registered.
pretty much up against the same thing, which is just the miles per hour that this wind turbine is sending them at them. And honestly, a lot of contestants looked like they were having a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the first one on our list, and that is Michelle and Natalie's A Child's World. Now, let's just talk about the design. I think the propellers do look nice. You know, they're long enough, they're not too thick, and you know, they have curved endings on one side, so they're thinking about things a little bit in the way you should here, the way that they're positioned. And I like the red and the white. I do think it's very cute, this idea that it's like a children's toy box. You know, they have little boxes, little building cubes, a container for pencils, and then little miniature propellers as well, kind of sporadically throughout it. And aside from that, though, the actual, not the turbines, but the windmill structure itself is a little bit blocky. It's kind of just white all the way up. But the way that they made this very, I think, colorful and aesthetically pleasing, I don't know, worked for me, and it definitely shows their strength that they've been putting on this entire season, which is just really good working with colors, coordinating, and especially with specifically the red and the white, obviously. Now, when it comes to the challenge, they lasted pretty long, not super long. I think they made it to 45 miles an hour or so. So
Yep.
not as high as what some of the other teams had. But, you know, it was fun. A lot of teams incorporated this, seeing there was other movement going on besides the main windmill itself. So generally, that's my thoughts and opinions. But, yeah, how about you, All Out Brick?
Yeah, I really love the aesthetic with this model. I think there's a ton of small details, and the judges use the word nostalgic, and I completely agree with it. Even something as small as their base plate is a checkerboard.
SWB audio
Right,
capture,
they really-
not
Yeah.
registered.
You can tell they thought the extra mile. They made all of these different toys. They sculpted all of them very well as well. It's very clear what they all are. You don't have to guess it all. And then just being able to incorporate their windmill like that, I think a lot of people went the route of, oh, well, we have to make other things move naturally. Okay, we're going to use minifigures and make a little town. But Michelle and Natalie kind of broke away from that general thought process, and I really liked it. Obviously, they didn't go super crazy at 45 miles an hour, but it's still pretty still pretty good.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of their challenge when I saw that they'd gone to 45, I'm like, oh wow, some people are probably gonna get going pretty far on this. You know, I'm assuming that 45 is already a lot, but then they must have some other ones that are gonna go even crazier, which we find out they do. But in general, I think this design plays to their strengths as builders. I think it goes to show you why Michelle and Natalie have lasted as long as they did. Just the attention to detail, their storytelling is definitely there. Not as crazy as some of the ones we're about to see, but it definitely saved them from elimination and from, it helped them continue on, definitely. Cool. So that's number one. Number 2, let's take a look at Zach and Wayne. These brothers, man, they have made some pretty crazy inventions, I guess. But let me just start out by saying, and I think it was mentioned by the judges too, the fact that they had to essentially, what they did is, if I'm not mistaken, they had to redo their design a little bit. Like halfway through, they went, "Oh man, we need to like think about this again." So they actually went back to the drawing board and had to, like, you know, with not a lot of time left, kind of like redo their wind turbine design.
SWB audio
Let me
capture,
say that for me,
registered.
the one thing that stood out the most about this was the little moving flowers on the ground in the garden.
Yes.
The fact that they were able to attribute or like connect the movement from the propellers to not only have the stuff moving around the sides of the propeller, there was literally a conveyor belt, you know, going up and down, but the little shaking of the flowers in the bed garden, like, that was just so cool. And those are like the types of intricate details that the judges are looking for. But not only that, I mean, they went to, I think, 50 miles an hour, Christian. What was it? Did they go to 50, 55?
Yeah, 55.
55, so like only 5 away from the max, which was 60. So incredible, you know. And one thing I also noticed is when they first started talking about this, I was like, I don't know, you know, Zach and Wayne have usually been really out there, and this design is not in a bad way, but kind of just, you know, a little farm. You know, it's not like anything too crazy colorful going on as far as just like these wild dragons that they did, or like their previous design for their car. So I was at first thinking, you know, let's see what happens. And then lo and behold, it's the surprise of the flower bed moving, that conveyor belt going up and down on the side of the wind turbine. And the propellers themselves, you know, I am assuming it's generally as smart, and you're the engineer, so you'll be able to talk about this, Christian, but it's generally smart to not keep them too big, so that way the wind isn't pushing against them. But at the same time, they are just big enough to catch that air and keep spinning. So yeah, overall, those are my thoughts. I really liked this build. It was surprising to me that they lasted as long as they did, and definitely those little intricate details of the flower beds moving and all the extra movements that were able to be in there, I think just like gave them a lot of those points that kept them from getting eliminated. So yeah, Christian, how did you like Zach and Wayne's Oasis, as they call it?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head here. They have normally been really out there with
audio
their designs.
capture, not
and for
registered.
this one, they kind of simplified it, but they really drove that mechanism that runs all throughout. And I think that's where we really got to see them shine as builders, is in this specific model. They put it into the mechanism. To touch on the like the air turbines, what you said, a couple of the main factors that affect how well they spin and generate power is the surface area of the different blades, the number of blades, the pitch of the blades are like the biggest factors that affect how much energy they produce. And while the energy produced doesn't really matter for like a lot of these teams, it did matter for Zach and Wayne. So I don't know how much they kind of messed around with tilting those different blades, but yeah, that is a part of it as well. Those flower beds also blew me away as well. I would love to see like the X-ray view of the bottom of how they combined all of that. Like, I imagine it's like some sort of big gear system, which would have been cool to see how they pulled it off. But I think they didn't do like the best out of the teams, obviously, but I think they still stopped this one pretty hard.
Totally. 100%. I think, yeah, we're both pretty much in agreement. My main thing was just it didn't look at first like one of their classic builds, but in fact it did when it just was able to surprise us with all these extra little movements that were attributed to the windmill as well. You know, the energy in a way that it was using was causing all this extra movement, which was really cool. Quickly in the chat, we have Guillotine, watched you as a kid. I loved your BrickCon vids. Thanks for watching, man. DJ Alistair says, wow, that's amazing. Postnog Ongnam says, oh, are pieces specifically made for the builders in the show? They don't get to use their own parts. So they use existing
SWB
parts,
audio
basically. Almost
capture
every part that's
not
currently
registered.
available within the warehouse that they shoot the show in. So there are all these drawers that you can pull from. And I'm sure, before the season gets going, before every episode, they're allowed to walk around and know where things are, get a sense of like, I'm sure, if I was a producer on this show, you give them a day or two of just practicing how to run around the area, how to find the pieces where Technic pieces are, where bricks are, where specialty pieces are, where minifigure pieces are, all this stuff. So that way they're really knowledgeable. So that way when it comes to the actual challenges and they're pressed for time, they can kind of go and do things. But also, yes, Panamon, assuming the warehouse does not have any Bionicle parts, they do not, because those have been out of production for like 10 years. But some Technic pieces still are around. When they were rebuilding the Lamborghini, as we saw in the last episode, the Derby app, they were using Technic pieces that were used in Bionicle sets. So there's still some around. And generally, that to answer that question, they can use whatever they want. However much Technic you want to use, whatever you want is totally allowed. But yeah, just to answer some of the questions there in the chat, felt like doing that. All right, let's go to number 3 now. So we had Zach and Wayne's Oasis. Oh, did you have something to say, Christian?
Yeah, someone should sneak in a little Kanoe mask.
Yeah,
slip it in the pocket.
In their
Come
back
on.
pocket. If they don't check, just put the Kanoe How on one of the... All right, so up next we have the Tidal Turbine Tango. This is Lauren and Brian. This is the sibling duo, right, if I'm not mistaken. These are the brother and sister team who I was worried for in this challenge, definitely. Their idea was that there's this underwater kind of thing going on where they have the creatures in the underwater, coral reef, all this stuff going on. It's funny, Caleb and Jacob did a similar thing with Atlantis, as we'll get into. But, a lot of colorful stuff going on here. The problem is, as the judges said, that they're really just building on a gray rock foundation, which isn't the most attractive. And
not registered.
The kind of greebling that's going on, it does detract from a lot of the colorful creatures and characters that they have in there that are great. These little squids, these little octopus characters, jellyfish, but it's hard because you're distracted by a lot of what the base layer is. And the tower itself is just kind of this chunk going upwards. There's some colors on the side that they have going on, little outlines of like a lobster or a shell or, a coral reef. But it's almost too much going on that, like, greebling works in that it's so tiny, minuscule, that from far away it looks like really cool. But here, because there's so many colors going on, it detracts from just the look itself. Now, I think, Christian, if I'm not mistaken, they went pretty far. They went to like 40 miles an hour or something. 45.
They
right?
went to 50.
They went to 50. So it goes to show you the structure was good and the wind turbine itself was good. They have just two opposite, as you can see, with the support. But, they didn't make it into the top. They didn't make it into the bottom. Again, I think almost out of all of these building teams, Lauren and Brian have been the ones that they aren't really focused on a lot, and they just have been able to slide through every competition. And they were able to slide through with this one just because of the fact that they went to 50 miles an hour, which is impressive from like the engineering point of view. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the Tidal Turbine Tango by Lauren and Brian. How about you, Christian?
Yeah, so they definitely had just I don't know if it was want to say too many colors on the base. They just collided. There wasn't a great separation of all of them. Like if they had the same colors but put like different color creatures and made them each their own big model out of those colors, I would not see a problem with that. But when you look at the gray, the green, and then the magenta along the bottom, it's tough to see what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot clashing.
SWB audio
it could have been
capture
executed
not
better.
registered.
It's not like it was badly executed. I still think it's okay. It hides those sea creatures a little bit, if anything. That's it. I think they did a good job with the turbine, though. Obviously, 50 miles per hour is pretty good. The main turbine worked well. Those smaller elements didn't work as well. That like was connected to the turbine, or like those smaller spinning elements. So they were definitely not great, but I think at this point in the competition, there's only 7 teams in this round. So you really have to be in the top 5 or else you're in the bottom 2 there. So I think they're not like your standard like bottom 2. Like when you hear bottom 2, you're like, you probably think they did pretty bad, but they actually didn't do terrible. We're just at that point in the competition where the bar is raised and you got to be on your game every week. And for teams such as Lauren and Brian, who might have kind of skirted by on some weeks just being in the middle of the road, that's really not going to be an option anymore.
I agree. And it's going to be something that is a factor for a lot of these builders going forward. It's like we're going into the final, like, what is it, 3 or 4 episodes after this? So
Yeah.
it's going to be like make it or break it. Like, you know, you have to be really on top of these. And it's like, you know, I feel like if you're a contestant on this show, you've been around these judges for so long, you kind of understand what they're looking for. And I think, you know, if you've been on this show for however many episodes now, this is episode 7, you have to understand what they're looking for, which is a good story. You know, like you have your color scheme, you have your kind of like the vibe that your build is supposed to get. But when things get too clashy and distracting from the points you're trying to make within the build, you do have problems like what Lauren and Brian dealt with here. But fortunately, you know, they were able to make the cut and move on.
SWB audio capture,
yeah, good on
not
them at
registered.
the end of the day. Amazing that it lasted as long as it did. I did not think that all these builds were going to go, you know, over 40, 45 miles an hour.
No, same here. I thought some of them were going to go flying at like very low speeds.
Because it's like plastic, you know?
I know. It's just like the principle of forces caused by wind. It's like, how strong are those bricks actually going to be able to hold? And I wonder if they got a little crash course on, you know, they showed like the Lego Learn was how to control the wind spinning the windmills. So I imagine they also probably had a team come in and be like, hey, this is probably the type of structures you want to lean towards.
Yeah, you think so? Maybe, yeah. All right. Now let's transition over to the next one, which was Mark and Steven's Whim-Powered Terraforming. Now, it's interesting, you know, they are a team that it's like hit or miss for me. I really like their dynamic. They're pretty hardcore and competitive when building. And just the ideas that they've been able to come up with is, you know, the ideas, their imagination is great. And for me, this kind of idea that they're on another planet, there's astronauts terraforming another planet, is a cool idea. Just for me personally, looking at this build, the actual build of the windmill itself is great. I actually really think that them being able to get 2 on here, you know, 2 windmills, 2 turbines, is a plus. Like for me, if I was a judge, you know, it's like the challenge was to have 1, but they managed to get 2 on here, which is great. Yeah. I like the little rings around it. They give it this like, you know, outer space vibe, while at the same time having these little like junction underneath where it's like they're terraforming. They have all this system going on that's like, you know, these astronauts have come here to terraform the planet and also like use a way to make energy by putting up these windmills. Really just, I mean, really cool idea and concept. My personal favorite, like I guess you could call gimmick that they had while the wind was blowing was the 2 astronauts that are just holding on to those little strings and they're just like moving in the wind. Yeah. And like that, you know, they held on the whole time. I think they were one of the teams or one of the only teams that went to 60 miles an hour, correct? So
yes, they did hit 60.
They hit 60, which is wild to think about. And the fact that those little astronaut guys, I know it's such a small detail, but the fact that they were able to hold on, I think it was just a really cool effect to give this whole design. I think there was maybe one like negative comment made by the judges, which was just that the bottom, you know, they were trying to have it be on another planet and they didn't have enough time to do that per se. I don't know. I didn't really have many problems with this. Personally, this was my favorite. And the fact that they weren't in the top 2, Mark and Steven, I was actually a little surprised. I was thinking that they were definitely going to be in the top 2 just because of how much the judges seemed to like the idea and those astronauts holding on and everything. So I was surprised that they didn't make it in the top 2. Personally, this was my favorite. But and at 60 miles an hour, it's like you'd think based on that, like they would be able to make it to the top. But how about you, Christian? What do you think in general about Mark and Stevens?
Yeah, I really liked it as well. I think it could have definitely had an argument for the top 2. I agree. the judges, I know one of the things they said was, well, we don't really see this as like this outer space thing. And I think that's because Mark and Steven initially described it as a moon base. And I heard that too. And when I saw the planetary surface, I was kind of like, huh. Or it was just like a different kind of moon. Like, doesn't have to just be this gray crater, I guess. So I think the judges might have just missed it on that
SWB
point. Like, it
audio
doesn't have
capture
to look like
not
our moon
registered.
space to just be an outer space wind-powered terraforming, as Mark and Steven built. So I think definitely a little bit of a snub. Like you said, they had not one but two windmills. Both survived 60 miles an hour. Like, that fan's not. It's not like it's blowing less on the second turbine. It's blowing on them just as hard. So, I mean, kudos to Mark and Steven. That they really did a great job again.
100%. I think, it's good to see them move on forward. I would have put them in the top 2. I even might have given them the win. But at the end of the day, it's up to the judges, and I think they really appreciated the next 2 teams, which, let's go over them. Dave and Richard. Now, Dave and Richard did, what was it?
No matter the weather.
No matter the weather. Cool concept. I like the play on words. Obviously, they kind of went for this really cool forest idea. Actually, it makes sense to me why they won, to be honest. A very colorful design. The windmill itself doesn't look basic. It's hollow. There's wind chimes within the windmill, which is epic. That movement that they were able to get, even though they didn't get to like 60 miles an hour, right? They still went pretty far. And the fact that like each of these little flowers was moving and turning, all of these roses were like bending but not breaking. Even at like 40 miles an hour, I was going like, how is none of this breaking? And I love David and Richard. They've come so close to elimination before. The fact that they walked away with the W here, I think, is a testament to their teamwork, but also just their insane creativity. Like this forest, it's like, again, oftentimes you would think that an idea like this would clash. Like there'd be too many colors and be too distracting. They keep a lot of the similar flowers within their own sections of this garden. And the windmill itself is just, a really awesome idea. And it looks so different. It stands out from
SWB audio
every
capture
other one that was
not
on
registered.
here. And the movement that occurred at the bottom, Bioscral, 100% I agree, was just a really great detail. And like while it was going in the wind, it was like almost a really cool art piece that you could put out in your backyard, that if the wind hit it, it would create all this cool movement. Just a fun thing to look at, visually very appealing. And again, I had the wind chimes within the windmill, like the hollow holes where those wind chimes were. They're like moving. You even, I think, one of the judges said like, Amy was like, you can hear the chimes hitting each other almost as if it was the real wind chimes in a backyard. So I 100% agree on them taking the W. I think them being in the top 2 was a given just based off of this idea. So those are my thoughts. Christian, what did you think about No Matter the Weather by Dave and Richard?
So this one, very, very surprising for me. Early on, we got to see in their build tests and their fan tests, when I saw what they were trying to go for with those flowers, I was cracking up on the couch because I'm sitting there thinking, they have to know it's not going to blow like this. Like the wind's going in one direction, and they completely figured out like, okay, this doesn't work, and they changed gears and they pulled it off. I mean, what else can you say? Like, they took that initial wind test and absolutely did the best with the information they gained from it. And no, they didn't go like the furthest with the wind.
Right.
But when you think about what they did in comparison to something no one else even dared to try, something like they were trying. And so that alone is enough to give them this. And Dave and Richard, they're a very inconsistent team, it feels like. Like, it seems like some weeks they'll build something and you're like, are these guys actually still good to be in the competition at this point? And then but at the same time, they've won not one, not two.
Right.
SWB audio capture not
7
registered.
episodes.
3 in a row, or was it 2 in a row?
No, they went back to back, but they won the one challenge way earlier with the numbers going up the side.
Right.
So they've won 3 challenges. Like, they've won almost 50% of them. That's insane. But they still just don't feel like that alpha dog team.
Yeah, they're very humble.
But I tell you what, if they're able to just pull off their best builds on days that other teams don't do their best, they could sneak into the finale.
Right. I hope so. They've been like kind of, for my roommates and I, our like favorite team as far as just the work that they do together, their kind of camaraderie, but also like no one really talks about them because they aren't really taking the spotlight.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, they should. Like, everyone should be very aware. Like, they've won 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, really, I love this team, and I think Dave and Richard have a very bright future in these competitions. They can keep it together the way they have been. I think this build, just in general, of the entire season, you know, I think once the season's over, we'll do, like, a post-season show of just, like, our favorite builds, like a top 5, you know, for each of us. But this is one of my favorite, hands down. Just like it looks like, especially a lot of these flowers look like the actual Lego sets. You know, those designer sets that they've been doing, that have like just like a flower pot or something, like the bonsai tree.
Yeah, the botanical.
Yeah,
the botanical collection.
The botanical collection. Like this looks like a lot of these are straight up from that. So. And again, like the fact that they're on these little stems and they were able to resist the wind as long as they did, just super impressive. You know, there are some of these details within the design that like they talk about when you're watching the episode, but at the same time, some things you probably don't even know because they don't have time to include it in the edit. And it's like the amount of work and like
SWB
I think
audio
smart
captured,
like engineering
not
that went into this
registered.
specific build. Is just very
mind blowing,
top tier when it comes to just this Lego Masters season as a whole, 100%. So, yeah, we're in agreement. Just an incredible build all around by Dave and Richard. So good on them. I'm glad that they moved on. Also, we didn't talk about it, but Mark and Steven like kept the golden brick, which I was like, whew, I don't know, man.
Sooner or later, they're gonna have to use it, right?
I mean,
we're
have to
getting
use it next step.
I mean, think about like 2 weeks from now, we're going to be in a position, or 3 weeks. Honestly, it depends. They could eliminate 2 groups in one round. But we're going to be at a point soon where if you're not in the top 2, you're in the bottom 2.
Right.
And it's like, but when do you use it?
No, I literally, 100%. All right. Let's take a look at Maria and Phillip. Unfortunately, the ones that were disqualified from this show. It's too bad, you know. I hate seeing people go. Again, they're a team that at the very beginning I did not think would last as long as they did, but they managed. They managed to pull through. I think what happened with this design is it starts to point towards a lot of the weaknesses they've had the entire show. Which is, while they're good at these small little buildings, the idea, the scope of what their idea is and their imagination was a little too much. They like bit off too much more than they could chew with this. You know, there's just a lot going on in the bottom half, and you're kind of confused at what's the story they're trying to tell. You know, they have 2 trees in the background. It's this little city, right? But each little house and each little, I guess, apartment that's on top of each other doesn't really mesh or weld with like kind of a general aesthetic.
SWB audio
and
captured,
then, I mean,
not
let's
registered.
be honest, the windmill itself is unfortunately kind of ugly. Like the gray and the light gray, it just looks like this slab of stone that's up there. I actually thought my favorite part, though, I will say I like that they had a clear back part, like a transparent back where you could see the gears turning. Like that was a fun, you know, detail for sure. Like I always like when builds, especially moving ones, show you the inner workings by putting a translucent piece or translucent Lego to have it be clear and see-through. But the number one flaw of this, which I'm sure you'll get into, were the turbines themselves. Just super brittle. Like you can tell, skinny, brittle. They're not going to catch much, and when they do, it's just all the wind's just going to push them back and break. And I think they didn't even break 20 miles an hour, right? Like they didn't even break 20. So
it was bad.
It was bad, unfortunate. I mean, it's again at this point in the season, it's incredible how long they've lasted. But at the end of the day, New Tinkerton City, Marie and Phillip were in the bottom 2, and they were unfortunately they were forced out of the competition. disqualified. But, you know, I love what they had to say, which was like, it means a lot to them and their family. And to do it as a couple also is just, you know, a dream come true. So congrats on them making it so far. But in this challenge, they were looking for teams that were at least going to make it above 40, which everyone else did, miles an hour. And just, yeah, the aesthetic, it was just a little confusing. I don't know. So I'll leave it to you, Christian, on Maria and Phillip.
So you talked about it a little bit. Their different blades. And so I think what could have happened with their blades here is they're very thin. And I'm not sure that's the exact problem, because that is minimizing the surface area, which in turn minimizes
audio capture,
the load
not
of
registered.
wind. However, that torque is going to be a little higher, and when there's not as much to grip it into place, that's when I think they didn't clearly think about how was this wind going to be pushing on the assembly of the blades, and also if they turn them a little bit more, that wind force becomes less perpendicular to the actual like breaking shearing point of the different windmill blades. And so when you start to lessen that by putting them on a little bit of an angle, then you can get a little bit further, because until the force perpendicular to the blade is at that breaking point, they'll be okay. Which, not to get too technical with the physics, but if you turn them a little more, you could get to a higher wind speed. Basically.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, when you saw how early it broke, for me, it was just like, yeah, they're done.
Yeah, unfortunately.
They made it far. They did make it further than I thought they were going to, which has been a kind of a trend over the last couple episodes, that these teams that we were initially like, how far are they going to make it? They're starting to get weeded out, and we're starting to get left with just the strongest teams, which is kind of how I think with Lego Masters, more than other of these like reality TV shows, it's based on like your skills coming in for the most part. I feel like with like cooking shows or singing shows or something, you can learn different skills that'll get you somewhere. But with Lego, it's like, can you build it or no? Like, it's really, there's not a whole lot you can do there for growth. So I think it is just unfortunate that those teams that we saw going in as not the strongest ones are starting to fall out. But I think they had some good builds along the way.
100%. And yeah, it's the judges basically were able to tell them, it was just a little cluttered and complicated to exactly know what story you're saying here. That's just a big thing. Like, you start to notice that these challenges are getting more and more important to appease the judges and make sure that the exact task is met. So, you know, good on them. I'm glad that they made it as far as they did, but, you know, they were unfortunately disqualified. Now, for our final build, we will be talking about Caleb and Jacob's portal to Atlantis.
Friends of the show.
Friends of the show, Caleb and Jacob. Yes, this is true. Portal to Atlantis, an awesome idea. Lauren and Brian kind of had this idea where it was like, you know, underwater, but whereas they kind of like, it was hard to really pinpoint what was going on. There was a lot of clashing colors with the rock face. Caleb and Jacob managed to pull it off pretty well. This looks like an Atlantis set, like a Lego set, you know. There's a little bit of that red, that dark gray, the blue trident. Insane detail. The little coral reefs that are hanging up, and like, I liked, Postamagnon just said in the chat, I 100% agree. The shorter blades worked here for this design. I believe they incorporated a little bit of Technic as well with some of those plates up there. So, and also having the smooth front of the windmill structure itself was like really cool. So visually, super pleasing to the eye. I think at the end of the day, if I were to have given this spot to Mark and Steven, I totally would have understand. But I think the reason why the judges chose these guys over Mark and Steven is just because Caleb and Jacob look like they really honed in on the story, and the visual aspect of just the bottom area as well is very pleasing to the eye. It's not too cluttered. You kind of know where to look and what to look at, especially during the wind. When the wind was going, everything on the ground was moving the right way that it should, and it almost looked like as if everything was underwater. The little fish, these Atlantis towers with, you know, the coral spiraling around them.
Audio capture,
just really a fascinating idea, and I think in general the The story here is very clear. The aesthetics come through. The color scheme is great. And the propeller was able to withstand a lot more than I thought. I think that the shorter propellers could have had an issue, especially with how skinny the attachment is at the end of the blades. Mm-hmm. But it worked out really well, and I'm very happy to see friends of the show, Caleb and Jacob, who tune in occasionally, doing really well on this show, given that during the Derby they were dealt kind of a bad hand during the driving. And I mean, this episode they kept just wailing in on Caleb with his driving abilities, oh my god, leave him alone. But they were worthy of being in the top 2 for sure here with this design, and overall just a very pleasing idea. To me, I love this underwater aspect, and it definitely looks like Atlantis, and it lasted to, I think, 55 miles an hour? Or did they get to 60? I think they got
I don't
close.
100% remember. Yeah, they got close.
I think Mark and Steven were the only ones that got all the way to 60, but they got so close. It's 55, you might as well say, give it to them for sure. But yeah, Christian, your opinion on Caleb and Jacob's portal to Atlantis?
Yeah, first off, way to bounce back, guys, after that rough driving course. I mean, they picked on them so much during this episode. Right? That. I felt so bad for them. And then they showed the replay of Jacob watching Caleb drive it on. It was just come on. And then this is the second time someone else has had a similar idea to them, where Lauren and Brian had the underwater, when Mark and Steven had the floating islands. So it was I felt so bad for them watching this episode. But aesthetically, really, really awesome build to look at. Like you said, those little creatures on the bottom from afar away, I was like, all right, I'm a little concerned here. And then as soon as I saw the ball joints, I was like, oh, no, we're good. We're good here. So I can see why they put this in over Mark and Steven. I think it's tough to say Mark and Steven didn't get the top 2, even though they broke the meter of 60 miles per hour. But the judges really do like aesthetic and story. And I've said before on the show, Caleb and Jacob are my favorite storytellers. Every time they show up with a build, you're getting an A+ story. And that's what's going to be the tiebreaker in these competitions.
Yeah, 100% agree. So overall, amazing. I'm glad to see Dave and Richard are just killing it. This challenge, again, they in the previous season they had one really kind of engineering technical challenge, which was the bridge building one that they put weights on them. But this season we had earthquakes, we had a derby, and here we have a wind challenge. So a lot of these physical natural element challenges in this season. And I think this was one of my favorite episodes, just because seeing where these teams have to put their engineering as well as storytelling minds to the test every team came with full force with their ideas here in this episode. So one of my favorites of the season for sure. I don't know, for you, Christian, overall, your thoughts on this episode?
I really liked it. Another fun engineering, different challenge here. They're just watching this season. If I'm an engineering teacher at a tech high school or even a first year college, I'm taking one of these and making it a project. It's so cool to see all of these different engineering applications being applied to Lego. I will say though, the downside of that is
SWB audio
capture
such as
Susan
not
and
registered.
Jen, who got eliminated in episode 6. They're at a disadvantage here.
Yeah.
However, when you think of Legoland builds too, there's some pretty good sculptures that are in there.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like to see maybe a little bit more of a balance of, okay, you don't have to do the super crazy engineering challenge, which is what it looks like we're going to be getting a little bit next week, of more of a design aesthetic thing, which is going to be really exciting.
Totally, yeah. And so if you guys don't know, next week's episode is going to be a puppet episode, which I did not see coming. Puppets, okay, Lego puppets, why not? You can tell they're really trying to come up with some outlandish ideas. So it seems to me they're going to be judged on not only the story that two teams are going to be able to tell together, but of course the aesthetics and the design and the look of their characters with the ability to control it. I'm surprised, or I want to be surprised if like certain puppets have these little, like things that they can do, little gimmicks of like where their mouth opens, or if something falls out of the side of their head, or it looks like one of the teams might be having trouble controlling the puppet. So something that is so out of every Lego builder's wheelhouse. I mean, I cannot imagine that any of these teams have tried to build a Lego puppet into a Lego puppet show before.
Do you think we have any puppeteers
like on this show that are going to be like, oh, I do this all the time?
Any sort of experience with it, just any sort of I know how some puppets work.
Especially now that we are down to just 6 teams, or a lot of these.
I mean, what a massive advantage.
No, to have if you're good at this, but I don't think any of them are. Some of them might.
I'm interested to see that. I'm interested to see if anyone has any sort of like, oh, I've researched or I've seen how puppets work, and we're gonna do this.
Right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Totally.
SWP
Well, it's exciting. I hope.
Not registered.
Do we know? Like, is there going to be an episode next week, or is there going to be another break?
We have to have an episode because we're getting close to football season, and that's when all of these shows are
Fox is
pretty much. Yeah, that's when they have to be wrapping it up by then because viewership's just going to start tanking. Even though this is a Tuesday night and there's no football on Tuesday nights, it's just football is king in the fall. So that's
especially on Fox.
What's going to happen? Oh, yeah, on Fox too. I will say, though, those first couple weeks of NFL football, we're going to get to see probably a ton of Lego Masters ads. So that'll be fun too.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. Christian.
Oh, and it's a team challenge. It's like a team up challenge.
Yeah, it's a team challenge. Yeah.
I'm interested to see how well, like, is it going to be you're so directly building with other teams that will be the bottom 2 is the worst puppet show?
Right?
Maybe.
Is it the worst show or is it the worst build? I feel like it's going to be the story that they're able to tell, which is like the show. And then it's also going to be just the design of the puppets, how well the story is told within the puppet's features, the character. And if it works as a puppet, like does its mouth open and close? Can its arms move up and down? Like, this is going to be a weird one. It's going to be a weird one.
I'm just wondering, do you think it's going to be like, say, Zach and Wayne and Mark and Steven decide they're going to be one combination? Is one of the catches going to be if you're the worst, like, whatever, both of you are the bottom 2? So you also have to think while you're forming a team, I don't want to be with someone who's probably going to outshine me, because if we get stuck in the bottom, this is where I think we could see Mark and Steven use the golden brick.
Yeah, I think they will. I would. If I was this close down to the line, I would. I don't think you're allowed to use it even in the final ep. And if there's only 3 or 4 episodes left, it's like...
you can't use it in the final.
SWP audio capture. Not registered.
Thanks for joining, Christian. Thanks, All Out Brick, for coming on. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in on this part 2 of a 2-parter episode show today, going over episode 6 and episode 7. So hopefully next week we get one on Tuesday, and then we'll be here next Wednesday around the same time to go over episode 8. But yeah, guys, incredible show. I really hope it continues on. I really think this has been entertaining and fun to do. So thanks for watching. If you just got here, go ahead and scroll to the beginning of the live stream, or refresh the page, and you'll see that I've uploaded these as their own videos as well, going over our thoughts on the build and everything. And I think hopefully next time we'll be able to get Thrawn on as well. So yeah, thanks again for coming, Christian. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And until next time, this is LegomationStudio signing off. Thanks, guys.
Stay bricking, everyone.
Yeah, all on bricks. Stay bricking, everyone.